All right, we're back. Greg Lehman is here. He is many things. He is a physiotherapist. He is a lecturer. He is a course designer. He is a movement optimist. And we are happy to have him back for the third time. Greg, thank you for being here.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
Now, there's so much we could talk about, but first off, I want to thank you because I just took your running resilience course and I really enjoyed it. Lots of good ideas in there and so forth. So, do you want to give maybe just even a brief, who is that course for? With a varied listenership, who would you recommend take that course?
I would say if you don't have any background in it, that's the idea there. My whole thing of like running injury treatment is to simplify it. And yet as I was writing it, it kept getting longer and longer because it's almost like you have to go through a lot of material to then come out the other end and say, okay, we can be simple here. But people don't often believe that until they go through the ringer.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So it's if you have some experience and I've been treating running injuries with the basics for years, it may not be for you. It'd be a nice update on the literature,
Right.
I would say. That's what I try to do.
Sure.
But or it could be really bias reaffirming, which I take courses to do that. I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track.
I
So
gotcha.
if you want your
Uh,
ego stroked, that's the course
and
for
so you're
you.
saying, as a lowly kin, I got through it. It was okay. There was a couple things that I was like a little cross-eyed, but it was okay. As a kinesiologist, I got through.
It'd be perfect for a kin. That would
Yeah.
be the idea. Yeah.
Now, we've had you on before talking about knee osteoarthritis and movement optimism and the cup stuff, the cup analogy that is, and so there's a lot of free content that is probably more patient centered or athlete centered on your YouTube channel as well, which we'll link to. Um, and that just keeps getting better. I don't know how you keep teaching yourself how to do all this video and all this, YouTube. It just keeps getting better, and it's personal improvement. It's amazing.
Just you just go on YouTube. I actually my software is really easy, and so you just double down on that.
Okay,
I don't
what's the
use any of
software
the
secret?
screen. I use ScreenFlow.
Okay.
It's cheap. It's Mac based. It's limited, but it's really good for editing and then adding B-roll and adding basic graphics. It's certainly not as good as the Adobe suite, but I don't know, for a 5% improvement, it wouldn't be worth it.
When some of that stuff gets more complicated, if you don't know what you're doing, you get in trouble, right? And you produce
Oh
something
yeah.
worse. Yeah,
No, because to edit a video, like a 15-minute video the editing could be 3 hours sometimes,
sure, sure.
and you get in the weeds and no one cares but you.
Now, the other podcasts, I think both podcasts we've referenced that, you're doing backflips, you're doing tumbling, these sort of things as, we'll say you're an adult man. You're not a young 10-year-old
No,
old boy.
no, I just turned 50. Yeah.
Anyone who's on the YouTube channel can check this out, I guess. Uh, so you're starting this new podcast. You've gone out on your own podcasting here, the Movement Optimism podcast. I've enjoyed the first, what are we at, 5 episodes? I've taken them all in. I'm going to say five. I don't know if there's been
Yeah,
five yet.
sure. I've
So
recorded
what's the
10,
point?
but
Why
yeah.
are you doing it? Why are you podcasting?
Oh, I was doing stuff with Adam Meekins for
Which
years.
was
It was
great
Adam.
too.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah, Adam's great, and it was good. But this just gave me a little bit more. Weren't doing as much, and Adam's super busy, and so I just wanted to bust out some stuff and then uh, do it. And how I wanted to do the podcast, which I haven't even done yet. One of them, actually, I did one today with Alex Hutchinson, and so that was the closest thing where I wanted to have more rigorous debates with people where I was going to do a episode called "Tell Me Why I'm Wrong," where I take a really strong stance on something, and someone has to argue with me. And what it morphed into is like initially I'll see someone, we'll talk about the stuff, and then when they come back for part two, that's where we have the drag out debate because I really think people can learn a lot by having not forceful but polite discussions to really see people's thought process there. So I just
Hmm.
wanted more flexibility. That's why we did the podcast.
And I like you sort of have to test people out and make sure that they're okay with that, and then you bring them back and you get them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I always ask, is it okay? You need like a safe word. That was the idea.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah. Is like your career hinged on this debate? You're
And yeah,
really
no
big.
one's allowed to cry in my podcast.
Cool. Well, the one question you ask on that, maybe I'll jump down here. There's no order to any of these things. I was thinking we're on to the podcast. So, the one question you've been asking people on that is when does form and technique matter? And around this movement optimism, which will work around the definition here. We've talked about it on past episodes too, but I guess I was curious on why did you choose that question as a recurring question so far in your podcast?
Oh, I think it's the big, I think because it's the fundamental certainly of my, let me go back a sec. essentially what movement optimism is based on. For so long, people are told they get injured because they have bad technique or something like that. And
Hmm.
I've really rejected that through the years. I think it's just a negative and pessimistic view of the body and ignores its ability to adapt. And it makes you focus on things that are less important when it comes to injury and to a lesser extent for performance. And so I always want, and it's a topic where people have really strong opinions both directions. So it's
For sure.
so far it's just been an echo chamber.
A little bit. Yeah, you've got on the first five were softballs for you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's okay. But that because we phrase it, when is it important for the prevention or injury risk reduction? And that's where it seems like, nah, no one really seems to care that much. We've had a shift in the profession for a while. But then when you say, well, are there times where technique or how you move is important? And it might be like, yeah, performance, right? There's probably a way that you set up your bike to
Hmm.
produce more force through the pedals versus another one. You wouldn't have you have a seat dropper. Is that what you guys have? You
We
wouldn't
do
have
have
it.
that now. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that if you're on the road and trying to ride to California.
Right. No,
So
you'd notice. Yeah. As someone who's my
yeah,
seat was just slipping actually on my road bike and it ruins the day. It doesn't go on
sure.
very long.
Right. So that's like a perfect example. And then the next one we'd ask like, well, when you're injured, sure, it like I'm sure you tweak your bike positioning based on what's sore. Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's a thrust.
Right, right. And so I think it is the curious thing because probably if you're listening to this podcast, the listener who is listening to this podcast would say, probably has been to somewhere where they've told them, their knee is sore because they've been heel striking running, or
Yeah.
they collapse their knee when they squat too much, or something like that, right? And that might not necessarily be why they got injured. Is that the idea?
No, because they like but that doesn't mean changing your heel strike isn't an option to help you with pain. It
Hmm.
can but then you could probably go back to heel striking.
Right. And I
So
guess importantly, it doesn't mean that if I'm a heel striker and I'm not injured, I shouldn't necessarily
it's
be chasing
exactly.
forefoot running or something.
It's too complex to make those simple assessments there. Or
Hmm.
like here's the thing, like so often someone could have a beautiful textbook squat form and they could have knee pain and no one would say, oh, that's because you have perfect squat technique. Like you know what I mean? Like you look like the textbook. So like we too often attribute causation to something where we shouldn't. That's why you need research because
Hmm.
you can't trust your lying eyes.
Yeah. Now you do say when. So is there, not to get nitty gritty on you, but you do say when, almost as if like you're not saying like, does it matter? Is that to like lead the person into it, or is it because you suspect there are situations where it
I do
matters?
say when because we want to ask when do biomechanics matter? That's a good. So for a long time, I thought like maybe technique would matter under very high loads, and I would agree with that. Like I always say I'm not gonna. I think I can do a squat and my knee can cave in. I can run and people's knees can cave in, but and I can, but I wouldn't jump off a building onto one leg with my knee caving in and try to stick that landing.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be too much. Yeah, that's an extreme example, but
It is. And I
that's
was going through this yesterday because I was like, well, what if Greg asked me? And then I'd be like, but that, then you would start saying, I think that it's not technique, like you've just overloaded the tissue, right? And,
that's
and
it.
you could have landed in a perfect one leg squat and just
Well,
driven your leg through the ground in that
so the
case.
technique there would be land on two legs and roll onto your side and roll out of it. So there is a technique. There would
Okay.
be less options there under
I
so
see.
that's where we do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And say or the easiest one to say when technique matters is again it's just shifting the way you move to have less pain.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that there's one right way, it's just less sensitive at the time, and that's a wonderful way to keep you moving. Sometimes that's why we limp.
And we will probably talk about a couple, we'll try and get specific with a couple examples for you today too, to just sort of work through how we would talk through, a lot of times, people come to you, I think, with pretty complex, like, issues that have been around for a long time. So we'll try and talk about that. But I guess one other example that I think about as far as moving pain is with a cyclist. Sometimes, you have front of knee pain, you can almost raise the seat. And then if you have, back of knee pain, it's like sort of about lowering the seat. And cycling's weird, I guess, because we have this machine we're attached to. But that would be an example where the technique might change a little bit because of the pain you have, right? But you might just leave it if everything's good.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you get caught up into like there's the ideal or the right way to do something, then you don't have those options to move with less pain. So
Mhm.
that's the point of movement optimism. Like there's lots of ways you can do this. And if you just look around and see it, you'll see high performers with different technique. That just tells us right there without the science. I just said you need research. Okay, fine. You can that
Your outliers, yeah.
yeah.
I work a bit with Rob Gray, who's a researcher at Arizona State University in like constraints-led approach and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. I don't know if you ever heard. He'd be a good guest
Oh,
too. And so he talks a little bit about, he's big in baseball. So as you start seeing like people throw faster and faster and faster, the number of solutions to that problem, like how are you going to throw a 100-mile fastball? Like it gets narrower and narrower,
yeah,
like the options that you can, you just can't do it in goofy ways.
exactly.
And so it starts narrowing, but that doesn't mean that there isn't variability within that, certainly.
Yeah, that's
Um,
performance, right?
mhm, it is. Yeah.
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 No,
Yeah.
I would agree. That heavier, that's why I mentioned jumping off a roof. There's less ways to land
Right.
safely. That's a that I didn't know that Rob taught that stuff because I would, yeah, I
Yeah,
totally
the
agree.
variability piece, because that's like the big argument is that in the skill development, you like would you train the perfect way to do it. Like there's one way to throw a ball or one way, for us to like hop a log or something like that. But there's, all sorts of ways you'd solve it depending on your body and how
Yeah.
tired you are and the speed you're coming in or whatever, right? There's a million, and then the same person wouldn't do it differently. And that in fact it's better to have many solutions to hopping over a log or throwing a
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
But the
he's a
heavy
really neat
stuff.
guy.
Yeah, that I would talk because deadlifting would be an example. Like people, you have the Jefferson curl, which is straight leg, and you're rolling forward and lifting heavy weight. That that's not the best way to deadlift. It's totally safe, but no one would say if I'm going to lift the most amount of weight from the floor, I'm just going to keep my legs straight and round up my spine.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
So the deadlift, they all kind of look the same, but there's lots of variation within it. Some people will have a more rounded spine, other people will be more neutral. You know what I mean? Like it's the person that tells they figure out the right way for them to lift.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So we have movement optimism. We've bandied about this this question that you ask. So people are ready when they come onto the podcast or when they listen to your podcast. I wondered too if we go back to the running resilience course. I thought maybe there are a couple takeaways for the athletes, for the patients that I thought were sort of interesting. The first one was sort of these styles of coping. I don't know if that's what you call it or
Yeah,
not, but
yeah, yeah.
the endurance copers.
Exactly.
I wonder if you talk us through those sort of two buckets, if there's only two. I thought there was only two. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's two. So this is so they're coping. I mean, someone has pain, and you want to say one way to talk about it is how do they cope with that. So like the most famous one would be the avoidance coper. This is the classic low back pain. Someone is fearful, so they avoid doing things that hurt, and that's okay at the start, but it's usually not good 2 years down the line. So they just start living in a smaller and smaller like circle of their life, and they avoid moving, and movement is in general good for the body. So that fear avoidance person where is not helpful. And then you have the endurance coper who can overlap with that, but often they're the person who I actually do see this in cyclists. The few that I've seen, the one guy I'm thinking of, it was like he's maybe 40 and he was really competitive when he was 20. So he likes to push himself, likes to be at the front of the pack. He'd have low back pain. And then when he gets back into cycling, he hammers all of his workouts, right? He pushes into pain, which is fine for the most part for many people, but way too much. Instead of the 80-20 rule, he's the 20-80 rule. Like, 80% is at a super high intensity thing. And then his back gets so bad, he would classically, take 3 weeks off, but then jumps right back into it when it starts to feel better. That's the endurance coper. I saw our joke in the physio world when it comes to pain is like poke the bear, but don't hump the shit out of it. This guy's like a bear humper,
Right.
right? He's
Okay.
making babies. So like that's what we're looking for is that it's just too much. We still have to respect the body and its ability to adapt, and the nervous system can just get cranked up.
Mm.
So that's the two crudely.
And probably it's a spectrum, but
Yep.
probably that people do cluster, like especially once you get maybe some people don't know or aren't familiar because they've been fortunate not to have, pretty bad pain or persistent pain. Um, but probably most of us go one way or the other, I would think.
Yeah. Or what you'll see, the classic avoidance coper just gets pissed and then they do way too much too soon. And then so they're an endurance coper
And
and all of
they
those things. Yeah.
they bounce back and forth probably, right? You're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna not do it at all, and then I'm gonna come back at 100%.
Yeah, and then there's a successful endurance coper who pokes into pain and it's great and they're doing okay. And then there's the unsuccessful. If people want to read up on this.
Yeah.
It's Monica Hazenbring. She is the researcher in this field, and
Hmm.
she's been writing about this for over a decade. And she'll get into the different subtypes. I don't get into that. I don't. I know
Sure.
enough words.
Now, is there anything, as if we're all listening objectively and we sort of identify, I'm certainly the person that will keep pushing until I end up in the hospital eventually. Right. So knowing that about thyself, like, is there anything to be done, if you were in one of those buckets?
Yeah, get a coach. No, I'm serious. It's the classic, like there's, I don't know this research well, sorry, but it's the old research on runners who get injured. Like it seems like perfectionism is a risk factor for injury where they don't have flexibility in their coping. So if they design their own training program and it says today you're doing a tempo run, I know running lingo more than
That's
like
fine.
um so they might be feeling like garbage and they're sick and run down, but because it says they have to do the 6K tempo that day, they do. And that's
Mm.
the day they should be doing the 4K hike or like an easy jog, so
Right. And,
that
and then they
that
don't check with a coach or they don't have one, like you say, right?
yeah,
Because I always am
yeah,
like, it was in the plan, but you didn't tell me you had debilitating back pain and,
it's
your knee was
exactly.
swollen like a cantaloupe. That seems odd. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's that. I know Alex Hutchinson, he wrote about that years ago, some nice and probably an outsider runner's world, the coping, the psychological traits that predispose people to injury.
Mm. Yeah, that was one thing I was going to ask you. It's tough sometimes. I have a few clients, whether it's into therapy or into they're seeing a physio or a doctor, and I still feel like in Ontario, maybe we just stay Ontario centric here. It is tough still. Even as a kin, I feel like those connections between the practitioners. It's tough because of privacy. Would you agree? Like, is it hard? Do you ever wish you could just talk to the coach and be like, "Hey, what's going on with this person?"
If you get permission, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always want to check that out. It's fine. Or it's nice when you work with coaches where you're on the same page.
Hmm.
Like I work in Ontario, I'll work with Steve Boyd, if you
Sure.
know Steve.
Yep.
But I feel like he sends people to me because he knows what I'm going to say and it agrees with what he's going to say. That's where you want everyone on the same page.
Mm.
That's what's all. It's very difficult if you're very different. That's where it can be trouble.
Well, and likely I see a lot of, the type A or perfectionists, which is, probably myself as well. And it's not putting shade on anyone. But I think that is where sometimes that messaging you'd want it, whether we agree or not, like probably there should be agreement, right? But then it's like how far down this like making some super team, for a athlete do you go, right? I don't know if we're not usually working with, Super Bowl money or something on this,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. Oh, or when people don't, this is always hard when you're someone in pain and you have a team of people working with you. When it does look like they disagree, you always just want to, like, when I work with a patient, I know I'm saying something than maybe what their doctor said. I always acknowledge that there's some uncertainty here and I hope they're okay with that. And I kind of apologize, and I want them to understand why I say what I say. And then I try to understand what their doctor might be saying and how
Mm.
it shouldn't change too much what we're doing, but it's okay that there's different views here.
And I thought that was a good point in the course too, or a good approach to exactly what you're saying, where, you try and upfront say like, we don't exactly know this is going to work. You're not a car, right? So you might come
Yeah.
back, with pain and we'll try something differently. It's not, don't quit and don't, just push in 100% because it's starting to hurt.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a good insight.
That's the idea behind like patient-centered care. It's that they're the partner with you and you kind of lay it out on the table, their options, and then you work with what they want to do and what they can do at that point in time. It's weird though, because sometimes people, I think I'm like this. You just want to be told what to do. I don't need your goddamn problem solving with me. I came into you. You tell me what's wrong and just fix it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't want to be
exactly.
your partner. So
I see that a
fine,
lot. Yeah.
I can do that
Yeah.
too.
Even with coaching, right? It's like, just tell me the exact power and
Yep.
everything. And you're like, well, I mean, the body's a little variable.
Nope. Yeah,
uh,
that's fine too.
your device is only accurate to a few percent. Like it's okay. Anyhow, let's keep going ahead. These next two are a little sexier, I think, a little more, service for the listener. So once we have, say we have a runner, we're getting some knee pain. We'll say we'll keep it fairly simple. Um, it seems like if I take a takeaway from the course was that sort of increasing cadence, assuming it's not already very high, is a good sort of mulligan option once in pain. Would you agree with that statement?
Sure, with a runner. Yeah, that's easy as a temporary change to change the stress
Hmm.
on the knee.
Yep.
I mean, the easiest thing, I actually don't do lots of that until people have tried other stuff. But for gait changes, if you're
Mhm.
going to change how someone runs, cadence, there, boom, that's your best option, and it seems to clear up a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And even as a temporary, I love that you had a form fartleks, which I'm familiar with fartleks, of course, but the idea of form and just sort of mixing up, which isn't even
I,
necessarily cadence, I guess, but you said, just on a run, just try and run a little different here and there.
I just made it up. I think actually people have done this through the years by accident. It's
Yeah.
just the hypothesis. Maybe we just need different stress. So like, and I live in Toronto, so there's no
Hmm.
terrain. So the terrain won't have me run differently. So I have to actively try to run differently to get different stress. Or maybe I prepare the tissues differently. So I forefoot, a heel, a long stride, a short stride,
Sure.
faster, sideways. Yeah. But
Yeah.
you run
And
in trails.
mostly we do a bit of both, but
So what does the trail do to your running technique?
yeah, is it automatically, right?
Yeah, so there's a theory on why trail running might be easier on people because it induces that variety.
Hmm.
That's my
I
hypothesis.
think we
Or
see that in
different
mountain biking too versus road, right? Like
Oh, okay.
it's more dynamic. Like you have to stand all the time and you're always like front and back of the saddle and, descending, right? So like whereas road and especially indoor cycling, it's like one position always seated, pretty much. So,
Yeah. Or it's like the office worker. Sitting's not horrible, but if you have to sit for 8 hours a day, it's just hard to do the same thing.
mhm,
And then so you stand for a bit. But
yeah.
then if you talk to a cashier, they're like, I hate standing. I want to sit for a bit. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, not one isn't better than the other. You just want the variety
We've been
there.
going to Run Club down here in Brevard, and there's a great group, really, really fun. They meet at a brewery. The brewery is the main reason we're going for afterwards.
I know
But
that.
the guy who runs it is a sort of a contractor, I think. He's been like standing on scaffolding, and when he starts the run, like you would love it. He like can barely like he's like a stick man, like barely. And he says it's because there's these micro movements in the scaffolding he's standing on for like 8 hours of the day and he's just
Oh,
ruined. But then by the end, he actually is running pretty smoothly. It's like
it
really
warms
honest.
up.
Yes, I guess. Yeah,
There is work on that, and occupational laborers who lift it that adding sitting to their day is healthier for them. And then there's work with the office worker where adding standing in the day is healthy for
right.
them.
Which is tough. Yeah, it's tough because you want to have that big like sitting is death. Yeah.
It's not so bad. You got it, a little bit of both. That's it. It's easy. See, we
Yeah.
overcomplicate things.
I think that's good on cadence. So again, if you have the pain, then maybe just mix it up even for temporary. And I like that too, that it's not like forever, but it's, just it gives someone something to do, go out and just, instead of doing intervals today, just practice, can you run at 80, 85, 90 RPM, what 180,
Yeah.
what, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, cool.
And if you do that, know that if you run with a heart rate monitor or you have a sense of effort, it will be harder. Your heart rate will go up like 8 beats, 10 beats.
Sure.
Mine does when I
Yeah.
bump it up
You look
10
like you're
steps a minute.
prancing a little bit across the
There
road.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it won't feel good. And yeah, so that happens. But that the research would say that tends to change in 6 weeks. Maybe you get used to it. Not many
Yeah.
studies in there.
Yeah. Okay. The last one then was around sort of I said speed kills, but this idea that, the forces, and I get confused by these graphs. This is where my kin brain gets trouble. So you might need to help me here. But as the speed comes up, then the forces essentially are increasing like exponentially in running. Would you agree with that? I feel like I'm simplifying it somewhat.
Uh,
Do you know where I'm going? So the argument was sort of like the people who train in the middle ground, at least how I took it, was that they would be experiencing more forces uh, because of the increasing speed.
Uh, yeah, like it kind of depends. It's weird, surprisingly. So I think with the Achilles tendon, the calf, when you increase speed, yeah, there'll be more calf strain. Um, and then, but sometimes I think when it comes to the knee, it's not as much as you would think. It does increase a little bit, but after a while, it's not the same. I don't get too caught up on the academics there.
Mm,
And then when people have tried to model through the years, I know what part of the course you're talking about. I don't memorize this stuff anymore because it doesn't matter for clinic. It's just academic. Uh, it is they try to estimate how the tissue will break down. That's
mhm,
that's the injury stuff. And speed is inconsistent because it's like, although loads might be more, it's a different type of load and it might not be injurious to the tendon.
Okay.
That's I think that's the paper that you're thinking of, so
Mm,
people can debate. But then anecdotally, I'm sure when you work with people and introduce speed work, their calves are really sore for a while, and that's often the thing that leads to tendinosis. So
mm.
it's a bit weird, the academic stuff. So the Achilles for sure, increasing speed will increase the load on the Achilles tendon.
Especially with speed work. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
The knee's different because like you might have a slightly stiffer knee, and if your knee doesn't bend as much, then the moment like the torque about the knee won't be the same, and if the torque is less, then there can be less load on the kneecap. That's sort of the idea where you don't see a dramatic, like if you go from very slow jogging to picking it up, the load will increase, but I think there's a point where it kind of plateaus there.
Mm. Hmm. Okay. That I think makes sense. I mean, I think that, the speed work definitely is a piece there. I had interpreted it a bit as, the people who run in the middle ground intensity, they're always trying to push to like, 4.5 minute Ks when they should be running at 5.5, 6 Ks. They're like taking on more strain or load or however we want to just call
Oh,
that.
you could argue that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that would be true. Yeah, yeah, that would be the idea.
So it
When you
would
go
be sort
from
of
when
an,
you go
I was
from
hoping
very
for
slow,
an
you go
argument
from
for
very slow
polarized. Yeah.
to medium. Oh yeah, you can totally make that argument.
Okay.
But there's no
Good.
benefit for running. Like if your easy pace is a 6 minute kilometer and I don't know, your 5K pace is a 4 minute, there's not a good argument to do lots of 5 minute Ks and stuff like
Which is
that.
what you
There's just
see, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so that you could say, yeah, because that will increase the load and it may not be worth it. If you can get the same fitness benefits with potentially less strain, that
Mm,
might be injurious. I know this is all debatable because you could argue, oh, as long as you slowly build up to it, you're okay.
this is true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, you're not gonna get strong opinions out of me.
That's okay. Yeah, no, you're getting softer. I feel like we used to get these out of you, but now no more.
I think I would because there's strong opinions on the other side before. Like
Uh-huh.
that people are like, oh, you have to do this. And usually
Right.
when I have a strong opinion, it's just arguing against someone who says it has to be done like
Right.
this.
But does it have to? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, well, let's keep going here. I think, a couple of the other things I liked there was around jumping. It's something jumping in plyometrics, which we can maybe even define that here as your first question. Um, I've never included a ton of it in my programming personally or for clients. So I was really excited about all the stuff covered in it. So do you want to give us just that brief definition there? Like what's the difference between jumping and plyometrics?
so a jump, you could just do one jump, right? You jump up in the air. All right. That's what a jump is. You go in the air. A plyo would be like doing several jumps in a row
Hmm.
would be one. So and that would be like bounding forward two-legged. Some people will call bounding going from one leg to the other. But plyo just means like you decelerate your body and then you explode off the ground. You have to have what's called the stretch shortening cycle. So that's a classic plyo. Or a plyo would be someone skipping if you're just skipping rope or
Right.
hopping.
Right. Yeah. So
Jumping is
there's no pause in between or balancing. It's just like multiple jumps in a
no,
row.
yeah, it's that because a jump program could be you just jump as high as you can, you rest a couple seconds, jump again.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
plyo program would be related to jumping. This would be still a plyo. You jump off a box, hit the ground, and explode up. That's a
Sure.
plyometric, even though it's a jump. But you had that like
Yeah.
that eccentric fast component followed by the
And
yeah.
generally, people should start with the single jump, like a jump option, rather than going straight to plyometrics. Would you say? I guess
Well, here, no,
skipping's pretty easy though, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is it. You probably start. This is where you gotta play around. I've injured a few people in my time
Yeah.
because I direct that course. I've injured myself. Um, but because I used to work with like 18-year-old girls or women, and they're so fit, we could throw anything at them and they would be fine with the plyo program. So start light. You can either start like just skipping a little hops, or if you go jumping and like a max jump, you do 1 to 3 and then 3 minutes of rest and then three jumps with lots of rest. You just gotta really go slow. So it depends on what you're doing.
Hmm. Now, in the course, you talk about a 5 minute routine, which I always find some of
Yeah.
these routines. I'm like, I think this would take longer than 5 minutes. But the routine was basically 5 minutes where you start with 10 seconds of hopping on the
Yeah.
spot,
Yeah.
and then you rest for 50, and then you do that 5 times, and then gradually over, I think, what was it?
Six
Number
weeks.
6 weeks, it increased the amount of work and the decreased the rest. Still 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I, yeah, I've so all I do, and I'm doing that today. I just do. I think it's too much for the average person. It's weird because they actually want each hop to be maximal. So what they did is that so at 6 weeks, so the first week, 10 seconds of hopping, you rest 50 seconds. The next week would be 10 seconds of hopping, rest 40 seconds, and then 10 seconds again, and then 10 seconds of hopping, 30 seconds. And by week 6, you do 10 seconds of hopping, 10 seconds rest, 10 seconds hopping, 10 seconds rest for the whole 5 minutes. So that's a lot of hopping, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's supposed to be maximal effort. And if you're doing maximal effort and that many hops, you
Mm.
have fatigue coming into play. I think it's too much. Like
Yeah, because it's
typically
not just jump rope, right? Like people who
no,
box, they would jump rope for 5 minutes. That's not,
yeah, it's
yeah.
supposed to be max. Plyometric training in general, power training is like max effort once you're warmed up and once you've done it for a few weeks and built up. Every jump is almost maximal. That's the idea. That's why I get mad with my kids who are in cheerleading and they do jumping for conditioning. Like
Hmm.
you don't do plyometric for conditioning to get fitter. You should be fresh. Like that's the
Right.
idea.
Right.
Everything is maximal. It's a nervous system, probably connective tissue too, but like,
Hmm.
yeah. So that program is weird. I would wonder, could you just get away with like 10 maximal hops, rest a minute, 10 maximal hops, rest a minute? That I would love to see that paper redone. I feel like
Well,
one
and it's
day.
funny, my first reading of it was that actually that's what you did. You did like every minute on the minute, you did 10 seconds of jump, and you just kept doing that for, 6, 12 weeks, and you'd be
Yeah.
good.
But this is like, could you imagine like 10 seconds max hops, you only get 10 seconds rest, do it again. Like that's, I don't
Hmm.
know.
It's becoming more like interval training. Um, yeah, and so the idea with this was that it was going to increase, like it's good for what? I always say like we got to sometimes back up when people ask me, is this good? It's like for what? What were you trying to accomplish? So this is for running economy is what
Yeah.
this was studied for.
Yeah.
And in more like not elite runners necessarily, but people who maybe are time crunched or aren't maxing out their run volume.
Yeah, that's like a lot of those studies. But again, you'd want to see it repeated in people who are intermediate to advanced
Hmm.
runners,
Hmm.
like it done in the other areas.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's
No,
nice for bone density,
you think
you could
so?
argue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably overkill. But in general, the bone density research is just boring old hopping once a day. And daily seems to be better than 3 times a week, just the way
Hmm.
bones work. Yeah.
Hmm. So this one we're talking about was 5 days a week, I
Yeah, the
think.
daily hopping.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it's weird. On one hand, I think I like the 10 seconds because I can do that like while I'm walking the dog. Like he'll stop for 10 seconds and then, there you
Yeah.
go. It sort of fits, right? You look like a bit of a goof, but I like that stuff that you can sort of just sprinkle into the day a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you start hopping vigorously for 10
Oh
seconds,
no.
for 5 minutes, that's getting a little intense. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Now the bone density, because that's interesting right now. Like I'm sure you see some of this stuff where, especially with the research around menopause and that sort of thing, that everyone should be lifting heavy and everyone should be doing jumps and increasing their protein and this sort of stuff. That seems, especially in the cycling world, this is a big trend right now.
Yeah.
Um, but the hopping and the jumping seems to be getting less play, and I'm not sure why because it seems more accessible. Do you think it's because, like, I just can't imagine it's the injury risk. There's injury risk to lifting a barbell or something like this too. What do you think it is about jumping?
Oh, I think a lot of research, you need a social media person and a marketing team. That's all it is, for sure. There's some
Yeah,
great researchers that are 1/10 as famous as other ones, and people never hear it and it never gets adopted. There's a
yeah,
massive amount of spin and spiel that has to occur. So I don't know. I recommend it. Like there's old research from Christine Bailey with perimenopausal women, and all she did was daily hopping, five
hmm
sets of 10,
hmm
slowly progressed it to as hard as you can, and like daily was and improvements in bone density.
hmm
Yeah, it'd be like it's easy to do, and you could argue just for calf strength and power and elasticity, that seems to, for healthy aging, our calves seem to decrease their
yeah,
mobility, their
yeah. It just
strength as
seemed
they
like
age.
it seemed like there was a pretty clear benefit at the end of it all, right? And it's
Yeah,
versus having to buy or get to big dumbbells and start deadlifting, it just seems probably good to also do that. We agree on that,
yeah,
but if you're trying to convince people to do something, and this is a 5 minute thing, it seems
beautiful to start. Yeah,
no equipment. Yeah. I had mentioned I sent you the wrong study, and so it's a very similar one. And the only difference was there was two different jumps. They wanted a side to side or multi-directional one.
yeah,
and they wanted a two-legged, I guess they call it a linear jump. So I guess essentially a box jump or a squat jump or
Yeah.
something up in the air, or I guess just hopping. And they did it with elite level cyclists, and they were looking more at the bone density, and they tried to integrate. So they wanted them to do it 5 times. And I thought the most interesting finding was that they did it 3 times. They wanted 5, they did 3 across the board. And they did find that in the femoral head, was it, or the greater trochanter, I guess they saw actually a change in the bone mineral density, but not in the spine or the hip as much.
Yeah. Not surprised.
And that's what they said, that like because of the upper body isn't really involved and stuff like that.
We're amazing at damping, right?
Hmm.
That's so once it gets to the spine, that's why your eyes don't bulge out of your head when you hop, because
Mm.
we've dampened it all the way up the system, right? We're
Yeah.
just
I don't
good
know.
at we're good at that. Yeah.
So do you think then is that, if we look beyond just cycling and running performance, like that's where I start wondering, like, is like the good old plyo push-up, is that something that like would maybe get at that? Or do you think that's where it's like, well, you need to actually start weightlifting now to get at some of
So
those?
here's the thing. I would before the other I would say you have to train heavy like squats, right? 5 sets of 5, less than like heavy load to do it. My friend Neil Mai, who's on the podcast, he's the kettlebell physio, and he did a study where they're swinging the kettlebells heavy, but still not 30 reps sometimes, so it wouldn't be technically very heavy. Um, and they didn't, in a few people, they actually did measure bone density. It was just a bonus, like a few cases that he looked at, and there were improvements in bone density. So it's weird. It wasn't the heaviest stuff, but they got improvements in bone density. So I'd
Using
like to
kettlebell swings, you're saying?
kettlebell swings and all these other and Turkish get ups, just a really nice, well-rounded program, hardstyle
Mm.
kettlebell. And so it's like, what else is going on? Like, why are they improving? And I always, this is just me theorizing, folks. I view the body as like an ecosystem, right? Meaning the health of the ecosystem is really important. So if you have REDS or relative energy deficiency, your ecosystem's not that healthy and you're prone to losses in bone mineral density. So we would say we want to address that REDS and improve the ecosystem. So are there other ways to address the health of the ecosystem that might, lead to improvements in bone mineral density? So we it's a no-brainer to say heavy impact multi-directional loading seems to be helpful, but are there other things that we could do as well?
Mm.
That's what we always should be open to. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that complex system. It's
that's
something that's
it.
coming up more and more, I think now. I guess it's trendy too. Maybe complex systems are trendy now too.
So yeah, like look at the red stuff. Like if people's bone mineral density improves with addressing the reds, and you never change the loading on the person, then you it means you don't have to just change the loading. You have to change your response to that loading.
Hmm.
So could it be that exercise without heavy loading might do something else to help the response of the system to what they're already doing in their life? I don't know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that's, you could see the same thing with sleep. They're not sleeping, so now they're,
Yeah.
something's happening bone wise, whether it's laying it down or using it up. Yeah, you could see that for sure, right? And I think that applies, this idea of pain. We're not talking so much towards pain. We'll get there in a second, but that's, to keep in mind here when we're talking about the movement optimism and your cup analogy, which we've talked and we'll link to the past episodes. It's just this idea that you don't have to necessarily do, clamshells or something to get out of knee pain.
No, I mean, there's probably lots you can do like that and you don't have to do leg extensions or squats.
Hmm.
You could run to get out of knee pain. You could do hops. You could train your cat. Like there's all kinds of things. It's
Well, and
difficult.
that's the avoidance coper we talked about earlier, right? Like that's the risk really, is that like if you stop doing everything, as far as exercise or everything, as far as everything, you might actually start seeing things worsen because the ecosystem is maybe getting weaker or less healthy in other ways.
Yeah, and then there's the psychological aspect of just like the cycling or running was their life, and that's who they are. And then you remove that from people, and that's a real issue. And now they're anxious and depressed, and they have no hope, and their expectations are changed, and suddenly, you know, the pain increases because they're suffering more.
Cool. So I'm going to turn the spotlight on both of us, I think. Uh, Mr. Positives here. We both, I think, have hamstring pain right now, persistent, worsened when driving. Is that
Uh-huh.
what describes your hamstring pain
Yeah, I
or
can feel it right
discomfort?
now.
Yeah.
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 Don't like sitting.
Well, I've been sitting on the floor partially because I'm in this like little attic. We'll call it our recording attic.
Sure.
Um, which sort of helps, but not. It's probably good because I'm stretching most of the day and like opening my hips and everything, but then it comes with things. But the driving is just like the worst thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right leg. Is yours the right leg too?
No, left.
Oh, do you
I do
drive with your
feel it.
left? Do you have a wrong side drive car?
No, it's just sitting. No, it doesn't matter if my leg's straight or not.
Huh. Yeah. And for months too.
Yeah, that's the nature of it. Is if especially if it's more tendinous than muscular,
Hmm.
they they as you they take time, and I'm prone to tendon issues. So
Mm. And you
with
think it's
some,
more in a tendon than like muscle?
oh, mine is well, there's a possibility I got to get checked out. I might have ripped something off of the bone that I had an avulsion.
Well,
So
so I
that's
worry that I did. Again, this is my persistence, I guess. I don't have any like popping moment or anything like that, right? Like it just sort of happened. I can't tell you when it really came on. I could probably figure it out, but like there was no, and
yeah.
there's my hamstring. Yeah.
Is it in the muscle belly?
I think
Or
so. More. Yeah. Like it's not like right up. It's higher, but it's like not at the pelvis or at the junction. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so that I mean, rehab wise, I don't know if you want to hear that you need to load it. And same with me. But
Hmm.
normally doing nothing, provided you're not returning to anything. I wouldn't advise doing nothing unless you're returning to doing nothing, like just walking. You can get
Right.
away with not doing a lot. The reason we do rehab, like on things like this, is because you want to return to something that involves heavy loading and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I
No.
just started sprinting this morning because I
Okay.
want to return to softball.
Yeah.
Sprinting. It was a 6:30 mile. Well, I don't know what that is in kilometers. Just on my treadmill,
Okay.
but not really. So slower than my old 5K pace.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, and so I guess that's it, right? It's just trying to find that thing. I would say I probably have been avoiding things like stiff leg, like a one leg deadlift or something like that. I don't know if that's getting into the
So
area.
here's this is the challenge. This is all rehab right here. Is sometimes we back off and we avoid those things that aggravate it. And then at some point in time, we say, no, we need to do the thing that we're missing. That's why in the
Hmm.
running course, I give two cases. One is someone where he's a really good runner where we just backed off. He was already doing enough. And then we slowly built him up. And someone else was like, you've backed off for a year and a half. Everything you do hurts. We want to get you running again. You need to start running. You need to do these things that aggravate
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
and just build you up to do the things that
Build
you
the
want.
capacity. Yeah. Yeah.
Or what? Yeah. And then if we're lucky, so, sometimes the pain stays the same, but they've doing 20 times what they're doing before. That's a success.
Sure.
And then the A goal is like they're doing 20 times and suddenly they're like, holy shit, I don't feel the pain anymore. Just
Right,
take
which again
it
could
easy.
be their self-confidence, they feel like they can accomplish things.
Who
Um,
knows?
yeah, yeah, or just blood flow or
Yeah,
any.
it's hard, but for people need to understand, especially as you age and you're active, like you're going to have these things that hurt. And as
Mhm.
long as you know you're safe and you've been well checked out, it's usually okay, like to push into some discomfort. And sometimes it just takes time. Like,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with you. It just sucks.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's, talking about those coping strategies we started with, that's almost where there's like a bit of a calibration. If you can start being reflective or objective on yourself, where it's like, I'm the person who like always pushes till my hamstring snaps off the bone. Like maybe when I do feel that niggle next time, I do have like a blanket, like, yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
one niggle and I just start walking for that day or something like that. Whereas, as you say, other folks are going to be, it's okay to have a little bit of discomfort if you're running or something. Like running is not a pain-free activity generally, right?
Sometimes, and if that's important to you, you have to do it. In the knee osteoarthritis space, we pretty much say now, like, not it's totally fine and normal to have pain when you're doing these exercises,
Hmm.
right? If you're the one of the ones where it doesn't hurt when you do it, well, congrats, you're lucky. But if 50% of, like, I don't know what this data is, but a lot of people will have it,
Yeah. Yeah, which is
and
powerful, right?
that's
And
okay. It is
it's
powerful.
optimistic as much as it's pessimistic. You're going to have pain, but it's normal, it's okay.
It's not a barrier to you doing better and doing the things that you love.
Mhm.
And then it's weird. It's like, you always wonder sometimes when I work with people if, like, they have the same amount of pain, but they're happy. because it doesn't bother them anymore. It's a weird shift that you'll get with people. You
They
see
still
this in
rate it
some
the same,
studies.
you mean, or like the pain is still there?
I
But
bet it, and the research it comes down like there's a really great study where it was super successful, but the pain only went from 6 to 4. Or and same with the Neo A, it goes from 4.8 to 2.8. But these
mhm,
people are like happy.
right.
Like oh, it's just my knee, it's sore. Cool. I'm totally fine. I'm doing
Mhm.
what I love. This is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need a replacement. Be stable.
Right. Right. Hmm. Well, I will say I've been getting the odd more like 5 hour ride in and trying to get back down into like the drops on the road bike, which is like the most compromised position for this hamstring thing, right? Because
Yeah.
you're bent over, and I don't know what else is going on around the seat and stuff. But I will say now when I ride for like more normal times, for me is like 90 to 3 hours, say 90 minutes to 3 hours, it's actually not bugging me. So then it's sort of like, oh, well, I just had to ride for 5 hours where it was a little uncomfortable. So that's my strategy is just ride longer and then the normal rides will be okay.
There, I've had patients through the years when I teach through the years. I've had people give these talks where they talk about someone saying they've had some tendon issue for years. They've tried everything. And finally they say, screw it. And they go on like some 8 hour ruck or hike,
Right.
hurts like mad. And then they get back and 2 days later, they're like, I'm fixed. Like they just give up. They say, like, screw it. They hammer it like your 5 hour ride. And like, yeah, that's all I needed. There's
Oh,
always those stories which are so bonkers.
so in our cases, it's not necessarily bugging us. I think you sort of just sat it out for a while and just figured, maybe it'll go away from resting.
I didn't. Yeah, that I did an experiment because it was just I didn't have like any athletic goals after August, and I was just curious. What if I do nothing? I wanted to like, and uh, and it did nothing. So I'm like, damn it, I'm gonna have to put some work in.
So that's one side. So we'll move to our next case study. We were sort of this loose case study, I guess, where it's okay. I think some good themes came out of there. So this next one's a little more, I will say, intense in that there's been knee pain that's taken a cyclist away from cycling. Like I never had to stop or anything, and barely, again, it's really driving that was like I'm not really that bummed that I don't like driving anymore. Um, this case, it was a cyclist, young cyclist who had knee pain above the knee, so into the quad, persistent over a bunch of weeks, even with like resting, staying off the bike for, at least a week. There was some test rides, which we'll put in quotes. They don't apparently count as riding. They have a history of back pain and a lot of like kin tape use on the back, like for extended time. And they now find that cold is helping, but heat is not. Um, but it's not really affecting their rides. But after rides, especially after 2 hour rides, it'll flare up. So there's a bunch there, a little incomplete, I know, but where would you go with this person? They've seen physios, but it's still sort of there. They're still a little bummed about it. And they have a couple of these still icing, still taping.
Yeah, so always with these things, you want to rule out anything sinister. That would be the idea. Like the worst thing, I'm not saying this person has this, but you're always thinking, is there like a bone cancer or something? So you'd rule that out with the history and all that stuff. And then you think, could this be a stress fracture? And you would say probably not if they're riding and it doesn't really hurt. And then you want it to be a knee problem. So meaning is let's make sure this isn't coming from the spine, right? Can we reproduce it with the spine stuff? Do we have to do some treatment for the back or something like that? We want it to be a
Because of
good
the
old.
previous back stuff, you
Oh
mean?
no, just in general,
Okay.
just in general. But you'd want to look at that. Can you recreate it with back stuff? And then you're like, okay, why do people recover? Our big basic theory is like pain occurs when all the stressors in your life exceed what you can tolerate. So that's it. So do we like decrease what he's doing or do we add more?
Mhm.
Right. So what are the areas that we can optimize with this person? And it might be like you could use cycling as rehab for them. So when they did that 2 hour ride, like was that the only one they did that week? Were they riding every day, which I'd rather see? Like maybe could you do daily riding bouts of 30 minutes, 30
Mhm.
minutes in the evening if you want to ride more? Like what's the dosage? Like how have they really built themselves up, to tolerate it again? And then there's a touch of reframing there. Like ask the person, what does it tell you that you feel pretty good when you're riding and you're just sore later? Like that's a good thing. To me, that implies like maybe we need to add more activity elsewhere, right? Your body responds to these stressors. So let's add some other stress. And
Hmm.
that's where exercise would come in, or running, or cross training,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Is
So
there
that,
too much inactivity around it? Maybe just because trying to avoid getting knee pain or something.
so
I will
like,
say you'll like this. There's two other little pieces I didn't give you there. They found that it flared up. They had a 3-day block of life stress that flared it up a few days ago. For 3 days, it got worse because they had like really stressful time. So that was sort of interesting. They acknowledged that.
yeah.
Um,
And,
Go ahead.
and so when they bring that stuff up, you double down there and ask like, okay, what does that tell you about your knee and the pain? So
Hmm.
it's not just the knee. It certainly is the knee, but so are there other things we could do? And that's where you want to have look at talk about REDS, relative energy deficiency. You can talk about sleep, which is hard to say, change. They have school or work stress. They have other emotional stressors going on. It's not that you can change these things. It's just more understanding,
Hmm.
right? And then so they might have to go through about a few weeks or months of like nudging into discomfort with riding, but they know that they're safe. This is just how sensitive their knee is.
Yeah.
And so we would do a little bit more, even if it hurts.
And then as the coach too, this is where I'm like, but why did it have to be 2 hours? Did you like to your like maybe we increase the frequency and like could we do more
Yeah.
30, maybe 30 minutes in an hour? Because I wonder if this is like 2 hours used to be like the standard ride, but then we're back there pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and maybe an hour, as in maybe more frequently or like a morning and an evening.
All that type of stuff. Such a fun way to practice that style, or like in the ad, changing up your pace in that hour-long ride. And not
Hmm.
always easier. Well, when you have knee pain when you run, I swear there's a subset who rather run faster.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just pick up the
I think
pace
it
for
would be
500
similar with
meters.
biking because you'd do different things if you were working, harder, right? So it might even be a variable pace or cadence, cycling's nice because you can mix that stuff up a little bit more too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the idea. And then you always want to say, do I need a specific exercise? And that wouldn't hurt. You could add squats and leg extensions and stuff. Same hypothesis there. Give it a try for a while.
Hmm. Yeah,
A
especially because
month
this
or
is
so.
looking like a quad thing, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because the theory of why rehab exercises like that are sometimes helpful is when we're in pain, we have this ability to protect the joint, to offload it a little bit. And you could definitely do that when you're cycling. Well, actually, you can measure it, I guess, with your through the pedals. So if they're using the other side more, then we're not really getting a good stimulus on the painful side. So like isolated left leg, it's the left leg would might help that to build it
Mm,
up to tolerate cycling.
mm. Yeah, you're
It's
wondering
one
if.
of the exercise is weird. We don't know the mechanism. Just in general, we see that it's helpful. So it's worth going for it. And I just load heavy because it checks a lot of boxes.
Which I guess would be another question, right? Is there strength training in the picture, right? Because that would give some more activity in the day,
Yeah.
some more variety, and then maybe, would strengthen something that could be beneficial.
Strengthen, or we would use words like it just, like you said, capacity. It just builds up your tolerance here. It could be the muscle, it could be the tendon, it could be the joint cartilage. You just want to get more stress here. It's not you've had enough of a rest. Maybe it seems like they've had enough rest. That would be the concept there.
Hmm. Hmm. Love it. Love it. Yeah. So I think those are some good thoughts. And I think the frequency and the volume is probably a good piece. And then, yeah, what are the other things you say? What are the other things you can do to be healthier? I always think of that
Yeah.
question too, right? Like, can we add a nap or a meditation thing in there or, a little extra snack here and there?
Those ones are tougher because it's a weird, like I always stay in the physical for most people, but now you're getting these are healthier. That's weird. Why are you asking about my relationships? And so it doesn't always resonate with people. They're like, yeah, just hear me out. Just think about this. And then you learn like the background of the ecosystem and that stuff. And then sometimes it clicks for people.
Mm,
But
cool.
otherwise, it's a weird one. That's why Reds is a good one. This is what I mean by healthier. It's not just
Yeah,
the strength of your knee, it's the health of your system.
it seems like it's a pretty good one to go after for sure, especially with younger cyclists. Like it's not always, as you know, it's not on purpose, but it's, we're trying to increase training volume and just they aren't cooking enough, right? Or they're trying to save
Yeah.
money or they're stressed, they're running between all these classes in school. It's very easy if you're trying to push up volume as a young person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, last question then for you here. We're actually working on a book around sort of this idea of mountain biking, off-road cycling being like a great way to age, right? We've seen a lot of good examples of people who are aging well, even though it seems like a risky thing to do into your old age. So I thought maybe just to finish, you could, ponder here like how you're thinking about it doesn't have to be mountain biking, obviously, but like riskier behavior. You're a skateboarder, you're a backflipping gymnast. I'm not sure what else. You're into electric vehicles, I've heard recently as well. So how are you thinking about this like risks of doing these activities as people are getting older and how are you optimistic about that?
So to me, it has to be the trade-off with the fitness. So actually, I'm not skateboarding a lot anymore because of the trade-off. So I get no fitness benefits from skateboarding. That's the thing. It's not a workout for me, and the injury risk is so high. So I'm like, I'm gonna do less. That's the thing, and I'm gonna double down more on my gymnastics because I can mitigate the risk and it's better for my fitness and the things that I want. So that it's as simple as that. What's the risk and what's the benefit,
Yeah. Yeah, and you
you
do
know?
that a little bit with your daughters too, still, or no, or do they don't let you come anymore for gymnastics?
Yeah, the youngest one, I was in the oldest two when they were 7 and 10. I was in their cheerleading tumbling class, which best time of my life. And now and I had to earn it. It was level 3, so back handstrings and backflips. Now they're too good, so I couldn't be in their class. But the 10-year-old could be in her class maybe, but she won't let me.
Fair enough. It's tough having three girls, I imagine.
Yeah. So like with gymnastics, like I choose what I do. I'm not throwing I have thrown double backflips on the tramp, but I had a coach and I worked up to it and I was in a harness and then he threw in a mat. I don't go, my trampoline's out there now. I'm looking at it. I'm not going to go just chuck it later, you know.
Right.
And sometimes I have this happens, I know when you age, like you get lost in the air. I went in last week and I did a couple flips and I didn't know where I was. And I felt a little discombobulated before. And I was like, I'm not going to force this. I'm going
Mm,
to go do some core work and go home.
right. Right. So
Uh,
there's like the risk reward, but then there's also sort of this like knowing what day is the day to do it
don't
at all or
don't be
yeah.
an idiot. You don't need to
Yeah.
push it. I have to say to myself, why am I doing these things? And I'm like, okay, let's just focus on what the benefit is.
Now, do you
Don't be
see
dumb.
like I don't want to push you too much on this, but it was, why not just, ride a Peloton in your basement versus doing gymnastics?
So I'm in my gym clinic and I do force myself to do bench press, shoulder press, and some squats and deadlifts. I just hate it. I'd rather do just go and play. The reason I do those things is because you're getting attributes that I probably won't get from gymnastics, like for building muscle, building bone density, that type of stuff.
Mm.
I was just on the treadmill sprinting earlier. And all I do is I make myself run 10 minutes a day because I hate being on the treadmill.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's it. So like
Yeah.
because I have to. So that's why I don't do that stuff because I hate it.
So it's not all for enjoyment. I like it. I like it. Okay.
No, you have to. Like I don't like brushing my teeth either. I really don't. I know that sounds weird. I don't. I don't like brushing my teeth. It's weird. Should have I brushed my teeth today? I have to go brush my teeth. But I'll go force myself. I'm lazy.
Gotcha.
I haven't
Gotcha.
showered today.
I don't like showers, so there you go. We've both admitted
You
weird
know?
things about each
Well,
other.
we have to. I do those things.
All right, Greg. Well, we've covered a bunch of stuff here. We'll see how people like it, but if they like any of this, certainly I think, we'll continue to refer folks to you, and that's at greglehman.ca. I imagine you can find anything as far as booking consults and that sort of thing for any physio needs. Your podcast is the Movement Optimism podcast,
Yeah.
which we'll link to as well, which I think everyone would enjoy. There's great conversations and some really cool people on there. And then we'll also link to your YouTube, of course, as well, where people can find some of that information about OA and movement optimism. What else am I missing that's on the YouTube that people would like?
There'll be like nitty-gritty talks on like spine flexion or spine stability, just like a lot of debunking stuff. I don't do much of that anymore.
Oh,
Just more.
like the patient pain science stuff is on
Yeah,
there
there's
too.
stuff on pain
Yeah,
on
like
there.
you're not broken. Yeah, that's what we've had you on before too about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That
And
definitely.
sorry, my website has for those dealing with persistent pain, things like that. I have a book called Recovery Strategies. It's free, downloadable, no email.
Many
I
different
think,
languages as well.
oh yeah, it's in like 11 or 12, I think.
Yeah.
people have through the years translated it for me.
Cool.
So I really like that. I tell that's the best one out there. It's the
Love it.
cheapest one.
And finally, courses, you're in person. You do have these couple of online courses, but you are in person. I know you have a Waterloo, Ontario one coming up. And where's the other one? I know that's abroad coming up in the US.
Oh, next week I'm in Ottawa, then I'm in Gilbert, Arizona, and then Miami in April, and
There you go.
Sussex and stuff. Surrey in the UK. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. You're back
2 to 3
traveling.
times a month. Yeah, yeah, well, I'm out there sitting on planes.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it, Greg. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you.